Let us pray. Our Father, we thank you for your abundant blessings to our province and ourselves. We ask you to ensure to us your guidance and the will to follow it. Amen.
Introduction of visitors.
Mr. Speaker, a very important part of Alberta's tourism promotion is represented in the Tourism Industry Association of Alberta. And I have the great pleasure of having in your gallery today, Mr. Speaker, Dr. Brent Ritchie, the President of this association. Accompanying him is Mr. Don Smithson, the Director of Special Projects of the Department of Tourism, and my Secretary, Velma Tess. Can I ask them to please rise and receive the appreciation of this Assembly.
Presenting petitions. Reading and receiving petitions. Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Notices of motions. Introduction of bills.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce Bill number 19, the Insurance Amendment Act 1986. The principle of the bill, Mr. Speaker, is to provide enabling legislation for the insurance industry to set up the mechanism to create an insurance compensation fund to protect Alberta consumers. A further amendment in the bill provides relief to the adjusters from requirement of an insurer to sponsor their application for license.
The Honourable Minister for Consumer and Corporate Affairs has moved that Bill number 19, the Insurance Amendment Act 1986, be read a first time. Do you all agree? The motion is carried.
A bill being Insurance Amendment Act 1986, introduced by Honourable Mr. Adair, is now read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce Bill 220, the Retail Business Holidays Act. Mr. Speaker, this bill would prohibit a person from carrying on retail trade on a Sunday or major statutory holiday. The bill exempts, Mr. Speaker, from its provisions grocery and convenience stores with a total business area of less than 220 square meters. It also exempts such businesses as pharmacies, tourist trade enterprises, restaurants, gas stations, entertainment enterprises, and others set out in the schedule appended to the bill. Mr. Speaker, it also allows a business not otherwise exempted from the Act's provisions to open on a Sunday if it was closed the immediately preceding Saturday.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition has moved that Bill number 220, the Retail Business Holidays Act, be read a first time. Do you all agree? Is carried.
A bill being Retail Business Holidays Act, introduced by Honourable Member Mr. Martin, is now read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, I request leave to introduce a bill being Bill number 218, the University of the Peace Act. Briefly, Mr. Speaker, this bill would amend the Universities Act to create the University of the Peace, the main campus of which would be situated in the city of Grand Prairie, and it would bring the cultural, economic, and educational benefits of a university to the northwest of the province.
Having heard the motion by the Honourable Member for Spirit River Fairview for first reading of Bill number 218, the University of the Peace Act, does the Assembly agree with the motion for first reading? The motion is carried.
A bill being University of the Peace Act, introduced by Honourable Member Mr. Gurnett, is now read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce Bill 217, the Freedom of Information Act. This bill, Mr. Speaker, is designed to put into legislation a basic right of Alberta citizens to be assured that information used to reach decisions in government is made available to the public. Mr. Speaker, this bill is very close, resembles the Freedom of Information Act passed by the federal government.
The honourable member for Clover Bar has moved that Bill number 217, the Freedom of Information Act, be read a first time. Do you all agree? Motion is carried.
A bill being Freedom of Information Act, introduced by Honourable Member Dr. Buck, is now read a first time. Tabling returns and reports.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to table the annual report of the Alberta Securities Commission for the fiscal year ended March 31st, 1985. In addition, I would beg leave to file the Superintendent of Insurance annual report for the year 1984, and that's the business year of 1983, and to file the Public Contributions Act, the 34th annual report for 1985.
The 1985 annual report of the Farmers Advocate.
Mr. Speaker, as chairman of the Legislative Committee on Legislative Offices, I beg leave to table the report of the Auditor General for the year ended March the 31st, 1985.
For sour gas release, this is the third edition, Mr. Speaker, which was developed in consultation with the industry, the public, and the ERCB.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to table the policy recommendations for private adoption practices and procedures in Alberta as submitted by a subcommittee of the Provincial Advisory Committee on the Family.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to table the annual report of the Department of Solicitor General for the year ending 31st of March 1985, the annual report of the Alberta Racing Commission for the year ending March 31st, 1985, and the annual report of the Alberta Liquor Control Board for the year ending December the 31st, 1984.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to table two annual reports. The annual report of the Department of Housing for the year ended March 31st, 1985, and the annual report of the Alberta Mortgage and Housing Corporation for the year ended March 31st, 1985. The latter report was distributed to all members in January.
Introduction of special guests.
Mr. Speaker, it's my privilege today to make several introductions. The first one is a good friend from the wonderful constituency of Three Hills and mayor of the newest city there, and also the only city in the Three Hills constituency, Ron Davidson, in your gallery, and I'd like him to be accorded the usual welcome of the House. Also, Mr. Speaker, as a follow-up to my just tabling of a particular document, I'd like to introduce a number of people in the members' gallery. First of all, Mrs. Dorothy French, who's the chairman of the Provincial Advisory Committee on the Family. Also, the chairman of the subcommittee that prepared the report, Mr. Speaker, Mrs. Susan Friesen, who also happens to be from the Three Hills constituency, and Mrs. Hazel Smith, member of the special subcommittee, and Dr. Joe Hornick, Director of Research, University of Calgary, Faculty of Social Welfare, who is a consultant to the special subcommittee. I'd like the members of the Assembly to accord the usual welcome.
Mr. Speaker, it is my pleasure today to introduce to you and through you to the rest of the Assembly 24 grade 6 students from Bazzano School, which is in the very important constituency of Bow Valley. They are accompanied by their teacher, Molly Pilling, and parents, Dave Kelly, Joanne Saunders, Keith Learn, Doreen Learn, and Sandra Neighbors. I would like them to now stand and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly.
Mr. Speaker, today in the members' gallery are 73 active grade 6 students from Chinook Park School in Calgary Glenmore. They're accompanied by their teachers, Mrs. Donna Tabor, Mrs. Diane Fortin, Mrs. Eva Jones, Mrs. Bonnie Kerr, Mrs. Diane Weir, and volunteer chaperones, Mr. Jones, Mrs. Godin, and Mrs. Burruggle. I think that probably they're understaffed for this number of children on a day-long bus trip, so I'd ask everyone to welcome them to the legislature today.
Mr. Speaker, as always, I'm very delighted to once again welcome students from the Donnan School, 28 students of grade 5 and 6. They are accompanied by their teacher, Ms. Gail Brierley, and Mr. Vladishenko. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that Ms. Brierley at one time did work for the Department of Tourism, and of course, Mr. Vladishenko is a very respected and well-known alumni of the Shubka dancers. May I ask him to rise and be welcomed by the Assembly, please?
Ministerial statements.
It's okay. I was reading my announcements. Mr. Speaker, I was waiting for more introductions of visitors. Mr. Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to inform you today that Travel Alberta's New in Province travel campaign will not only encourage all Albertans to travel their own province, but in doing so, maintain and create thousands of jobs. Over the next 2 years, Albertans from across the province will be invited to take an Alberta break. Take an Alberta break is the message we'll be sending to all Albertans. It will serve as a short, simple reminder for Albertans that there's lots of opportunity to get away from it all right here in your own backyard. Mr. Speaker, the next 2 years will be an exciting time for both the tourism industry and for Albertans traveling around the province. Many private companies have expressed an interest in joining the program and offering their own special Alberta breaks. In addition, a $250,000 grant program has been developed to assist smaller centers and event organizers in promoting their events. Mr. Speaker, you know about the importance of tourism to Alberta's economy. If we can get more Albertans traveling around the province on short 1, 2, and 3-day trips, we can increase income in Alberta's vital tourism industry and thereby provide the opportunity for countless more jobs. Albertans today account for approximately 50% of all tourism revenues in our province, and that, Mr. Speaker, amounts to over $1 billion. We are out to break new ground in Alberta, and we are striving to break new records in awareness and participation in all the tourism opportunities our beautiful province has to offer, from the north with Buffalo Park to the International Peace Park on our southern border, from Paradise Valley's Three Cities Fair in the east to the Banff Television Festival in the west, from borders to borders all year round. For the past 9 months, Mr. Speaker, Travel Alberta has been working closely with the Departments of Culture and Recreation and Parks, along with the Northern Alberta Development Council and the Tourism Industry Association of Alberta in developing the program. I would like to thank especially all the members of TIALTA and my colleagues, the Honourable Mary Remesherer and the Honourable Peter Trenchy, for the assistance and valuable input their people have contributed to the development of this program. Mr. Speaker, members of the Legislative Assembly, be sure to take your Alberta break. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, in rising to reply to the ministerial announcement, I certainly have no objection to the emphasis to encourage people within Alberta to travel within the province, and certainly that is desirable if we can keep some of the bucks within the province. I would say, though, Mr. Speaker, that advertising is certainly a component of tourism, and as I say, this program on the surface looks desirable, but the point that I would have to make if we're going to be serious about tourism is that we're going to have to take a different attitude. Not only, I'm not talking about the government so much, but as a provincial-wide thrust. Because I've heard, whether people are from Alberta or outside our borders, that we just do not know how to treat tourists. We haven't taken it as a major emphasis. And that has implications for our post-secondary institutions. It has implications for the government. It has implications for Albertans generally. So while I certainly think that this program is desirable, if we're really talking about tourism as a diversification tool, we're going to have to do a lot of other things if these types of programs are going to work.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to, on behalf of the Representative Party, compliment the government on this program, but I'm just a little hesitant, Mr. Speaker, in that this may be just an extension of the Stamp Around Alberta program, which was promoted by the former minister and which was an excellent program. I have some concerns, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to direct them to the minister, and I wish him well because the minister is an enthusiastic minister, and I hope that he can do something for the tourist business in this province. Mr. Speaker, I would like to encourage the minister to look at getting more youth involvement in these programs. I think to the new premier that it's just about time that we looked at the young people in this province and came up with a program such as the Company of Young Albertans or something like that. There's so many young people who are now unemployed, especially in the summer, willing to volunteer, willing to work for $3 or $4 an hour. And some of these people would just be glad to have something constructive to do. So I would like to also say to the minister that I see there is some direction into training of people who will be catering to tourists. I've brought to the attention of the Assembly many times the school that they have in Montreal, where people come from right across the province. They can learn, they can take a 6-week course, a 6-month course, or a 2-year course. And I think until this government realizes how important tourism can be to this province, then I think we're missing out on many tourist dollars. So I wish the minister well. I'd like to compliment him on the program, but I think there are many, many more things can be done. And if the government's lucky enough to be returned and the premier's lucky enough to be back, I hope they leave the minister in that department.
Oral question period.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct the first question to the Minister of Agriculture, and it follows the devastating news to the farm economy yesterday that the Wheat Board announced that the initial price will have gone down almost 20%. The Minister indicated that grain is a federal responsibility. And recognizing that, my question to the Minister is this: does he mean that there is nothing that this government can do to influence the Conservative federal government on this matter?
Mr. Speaker, we will always take every initiative possible to try and speak for the farmers within this province. And in fact, this morning I had a long telephone conversation with the federal Minister of State responsible for Canadian Wheat Board and outlined the concerns that we in this province have about the decrease in grain prices. And I asked him at that point to give every consideration to trying to cushion the blow with any tools that he had at his disposal to try and help with the initial grain prices. I also I raised issues with him, example of which would be the domestic price of grain, which all members know that there's a range between a minimum of $5 and a maximum of $7 on domestic price of grain that's used within the country at the moment, $7 being the maximum price. And we are now at that maximum price, and I asked him if he would give some consideration to increasing that number, to which his response was yes, he would give some consideration to doing that. Taking into account, however, if you raise it too far, it does have some impact on jobs. But that is one clear example, Mr. Speaker, of initiatives that we will always take in trying to raise the concerns of Alberta farmers and also do all that we can within our province under our jurisdiction to be helpful.
Following up, Mr. Speaker, saying that this is certainly, I would classify an emergency situation in the western provinces and certainly specifically Alberta. from the discussion that the minister had with his counterpart in Ottawa, is there any emergency meeting planned between this minister and the federal minister and perhaps ministers from Saskatchewan and Manitoba?
Mr. Speaker, there is no specific date for a meeting planned. However, we certainly will be having further discussions. One area that we have raised and will be certainly discussed in our overhaul of the Crop Insurance Act is the Western Grain Stabilization. And we're hopeful that there will be a payment out of that program that would be helpful. I raised that also with the federal minister and asked him when and how much would the payment be that would be coming from the Western Grain Stabilization Fund, which is basically an income insurance protection. And he said, very soon. And I said, what do you mean by very soon? And he said, hopefully by the 1st of May. And I said, can you speed that up? And to which he answered, yes, he thought maybe he could and he would try. And I said, well, hopefully that the payment from that fund will be larger this year, considering the initial grain price reduction and the need for our producers. So he would take that under consideration. So it's areas like that. If there is need for a meeting, I certainly will go have one, but will raise at each opportunity I can the concerns to try and do all that we can to cushion the blow.
Supplementary question flowing from that, Mr. Speaker, the fact, and I think the minister indicated very clearly that he was opposed to parity pricing. And I would expect that would have an important influence on the federal government. But my question is, has this minister scheduled a meeting with the Conservative government, the agriculture minister in Saskatchewan, in order to review why Mr. Devine believes the domestic cost of production formula will help Saskatchewan farmers, and from there to assess whether it might be a good idea for Alberta and Saskatchewan to speak with one voice in this matter?
Mr. Speaker, I have no meetings planned. Of course, we have ongoing discussions, and I'm certain that at the next opportunity that will be a topic of discussion.
Supplementary question then, because of the most recent announcement with this almost 20% cut, is the government now prepared to reassess its stand, the Alberta government, to reassess its stand on parity pricing, and perhaps one of the options might be to work with the Saskatchewan government to influence the federal government?
Well, Mr. Speaker, to bring parity pricing into this issue, I have some difficulty with, because parity pricing covers a number of other commodities, what I understand of the bill that's presented in the House of Commons in Ottawa that's being debated across the country at this moment. But with respect to the wheat price and the domestic price of grain and looking at what we can do with the domestic price, that's of course something that I think is worthy of every consideration.
Well, supplementary question in the time being, that bill, as he indicates, is in the House of Commons. But I would say that we're able not just to go by that bill, we could present any other bill. So my question specifically, is the minister saying then that he would look at some sort of parity pricing for grain prices? Is that what the minister's saying?
No, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary question then to the minister. Is government at the least in favor of something that's been bandied around called a special federal deficiency payment to counteract what the Americans are doing? And if so, would he urge this one on the Conservative government in Ottawa?
Mr. Speaker, I also raised that in my conversation with them and asked what their view was about a deficiency payment. There is deficiency payments in the United States, of course, that are very expensive, and a deficiency payment here, of course, would be extremely expensive considering their deficit position. It is one consideration that he is looking at, but how seriously, I don't know.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. Yes, it would be expensive, but as indicated, there's probably $1 billion going out of the Western economy. My question specifically, in the conversations, it was raised by the minister, is the stand of this government then that they would encourage the federal government to move on that type of payment?
Mr. Speaker, the initial prices have just been announced, and I think everybody in the industry, including ourselves, is analyzing what approach may be proper. I always have discussions with the industry on major issues, and I do intend to have discussions with them on this one, and then I'll be able to state clearly what the position is.
Supplementary question. Has the minister been talking to any of our federal MPs, so specifically the Minister of Transportation, Mr. Mazikowski, to see what their stand might be on this and see if something could be worked out jointly on a type of payment?
No, Mr. Speaker, I haven't, but I will at whatever opportunity.
Supplementary question. The minister says he's reviewing it. I would say that this is another final blow to many people. And I would say the time for analyzing is gone. Are there any other specific things that the minister would tell us about here in the House that they might be planning in the next week or so?
Mr. Speaker, we have been very aggressive in assisting our agriculture producers, and we feel very badly about it's another blow to the agricultural sector to have the drop in grain prices, but we have been very active in areas of energy costs and fertilizer costs and interest costs and a wide variety of areas, and we are always assessing options to try and be as responsive as we can, and we will, of course, be assessing the options for the future in discussions with the industry and among our caucus colleagues and our Agricultural Caucus Committee to arrive at whatever we think is the appropriate approach.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. As the minister just said that they're assessing options and always are assessing options, why then, if we're assessing options, do we rule out unequivocally parity pricing then?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I can't answer that in question period, but I'm more than happy at any time to have a debate about the issue, but it doesn't look like a responsible approach in looking at parity pricing. There are other approaches that we think are worthy of greater consideration, but we'll consider them all in developing a policy.
I'd like, Mr. Speaker, to direct the second set of questions to the Premier, if I may, if I can get his attention. Premier Getty, second set of questions. Wakey, wakey. This is the legislature. Mr. Premier, I'd like to come back on the questions from yesterday when I asked the Premier if he'd been informed of the special ESSO royalty write-off before yesterday. And as reviewing Hansard, he promised me he would check and reply in detail. Now that the Premier's had a chance to review his files and check cabinet records, will he report today and whether he had been informed, and if so, on what date he had been informed?
Mr. Speaker, I have checked into it a little bit, but I want to discuss the details with the Honourable Minister of Energy, who will be in the House tomorrow, and who would be pleased to deal with the matter fully with the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Supplementary question. I appreciate the fact that you're going to have a discussion with the Minister of Energy, and we'd like to have that discussion with the Minister of Energy. But my question is specifically nothing to do with the Minister. I asked you specifically if the Premier was aware of this memo. If you as the Premier were aware, and if so, when? That has nothing to do with the Minister of Energy.
Mr. Speaker, no, I was not aware of the memo before it was raised yesterday in the House.
A supplementary question then. I'm sure the Premier's had his staff working on this. Has the Premier, as the head of this government, not the Minister of Energy, discovered whether or not the insider's deal has gone ahead as outlined in the memo?
Mr. Speaker, those are matters that the Minister of Energy would be pleased to deal with tomorrow.
Oh, supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. The Premier is the President of the Executive Council. Now knows, I am surprised that after a day that he wouldn't come back on this, but would the Premier advise then why we are waiting for a day? I'm sure he's had some discussions with the Minister of Energy, why the Premier cannot tell us today what is the result of that memo if the deal's gone ahead. Why does he need the Minister of Energy beside him to tell him that?
Speaker, it's a responsibility of the Minister of Energy, and I haven't discussed it with the Minister of Energy at all. And the Minister will be here tomorrow, and the Honourable Leader of the Opposition should direct his questions to him.
Supplementary question. The Premier, the old saying, the buck stops, not the Minister of Energy who's quitting, but with the Premier. Let me ask a question then, Mr. Speaker, about government policy. And it flows. I asked the Premier yesterday if he would provide a policy statement on whether bureaucrats in this government are empowered to arrange details such as the one outlined in the memo on their own. And he assured me that he would respond in detail, not the Minister of Energy, Mr. Speaker. And my question specifically, do such deals require ministerial approval?
Mr. Speaker, actually yesterday I dealt with the matter of policy when I advised the Honourable Leader of the Opposition that all legitimate debts of the province will be followed up and collected.
That's not the question that I asked, Mr. Speaker. The question that I asked is simply this. Can bureaucrats arrange internal deals like this without ministerial approval?
Mr. Speaker, all legitimate debts would be followed up by the province, and the Honourable Leader of the Opposition is inferring details into a memo that may well not be correct, and therefore he should wait for full details from the Minister of Energy.
Supplementary question. I believe the Premier said he was not aware of the memo. My question specifically, though, to the Premier, was he aware of the deal, if not aware of the memo?
No, Mr. Speaker, and the Honourable Leader of the Opposition still talks about a deal. He should wait for the Minister of Energy to go into full details with him.
Supplementary, yeah, only $19 million. But the question I have for the Premier then, to come back to government policy in this, so we can get a handle on it. As the President of the Executive Council, the Premier is responsible for documents, as quoted in the memo, blessed by Cabinet. My question is, has the Premier had his staff search for a copy of the document referred to in the memo, the one blessed by Cabinet, and will he agree to table it in the Assembly?
Mr. Speaker, I have not at this time, because that is a responsibility of the Minister of Energy, who will be handling it and who will be in the House to discuss the matter with the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, one supplementary question.
This be the final supplementary. It seems that the Honourable Leader is not prepared to accept an assurance that the matter will be gone into quite fully when the Honourable Minister of Energy returns, and seems to be devising every which way of trying to keep the thing going, notwithstanding the fact that there's been an assurance that it will be dealt with when the Minister of Energy comes back tomorrow. I find the series of questions has become excessively long under the circumstances, and that perhaps we should get on to another topic.
Well, okay, one final supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. I wondered when the Minister of Energy became the President of the Executive Council. I was trying to find out government policy.
Order, please.
To the Premier, has the Premier even at this point bothered to find out what the document is? And if so, and if not, why not at this point? It's over a day, and that's the way legislature works.
Honourable members, the Honourable Member is simply under rather ingenious variations, really asking the same question several times. I would respectfully suggest that he leave this line of questioning until it can be gone into properly tomorrow, rather than to take up further time in the question period today. The Honourable Leader of the Representative Party, followed by the Honourable Member for Lloydminster.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Agriculture, and it's in light of yesterday's announcement with regards to the decrease in farm commodity prices, and as well the number of farmers that are in critical situation with regards to operating loans. What I'd like to know from the Minister is what type of instrument is the Minister using to determine the crisis that is in Alberta today with regards to credit opportunities for farmers. What is the credit crisis watch that the Minister of Agriculture has in place, or is it done just by a few phone calls and sort of impulses now and then during a week?
Well, Mr. Speaker, there's no way that I go out and talk to all the banks or survey all the farmers. I stated clearly yesterday that I rely on the information that comes to me from the district agriculturalist through the Department of Agriculture in the discussions with the banks and also in discussions with the chairman and the board of ADC. There is to state there's a crisis. It's not a crisis. Certainly, there is problems in the whole area of finance, and that's why we made the very major step with our $2 billion program. But in response to the question, I use basically the response I get from the department as well as discussions among the banks.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary question to the minister. Is it the intent of the minister, and we have only hours and a few days before farmers must make decisions as to whether the kinds of crops, the amount of money they have to plant crops, whether they use fertilizer or not, or whether they're just going to farm for crop insurance. Is the minister going to put in place some kind of a plan by which he can listen closely to the credit needs of the farmers in the next few days? Or do the farmers have to get on the phone and just phone the minister? Is that the only opportunity they have? Or is there a listening ear in Alberta that's readily available for that crisis which exists across this province?
Mr. Speaker, we have taken a very large step this last year through the department in our Gear Up Financially courses. Farmers that are good operators, are good businessmen. They don't wait till the last minute to make their decisions, and through that course this last year, every assistance was provided to try and work out what would be most profitable in their operation, considering a wide number of variables, including prices. That is one area. We have enterprise counselors in place. We have our district agriculturalists there. We have taken every step that we think we can take. We're always open to more if they think they'll be of assistance, but we've taken all the steps at this point that we feel that we can to be of assistance to farmers for their spring planning, recognizing that there are difficulties, examples of which are the drop in grain prices, which have to be taken into account in the farmers' planning for the year.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary question to the minister. Could the minister indicate whether the farm organizations of Alberta have been put on alert to bring the best possible information to the minister and the premier this week, so that if new policy is necessary, the minister and the government can put it into place? Have the key organizations been alerted to bring that information to the minister and the premier this week? And if so, have meeting times been set aside so that the premier and the minister can meet with these various groups to know exactly what's happening out there? Because there is a change in circumstances as of this last announcement.
Mr. Speaker, as the honourable member for Little Bow would know, that we always work closely with the farm organizations and have discussions with them on a regular basis. And in fact, last November we had a conference which was called Opportunities for Agriculture, in which we got the best people in to give us advice, and the farm leaders were there to try and work out the best approach that we could look at for the long-term strength and future of agriculture. As far as farm organizations are concerned, I don't call them up and tell them what to do. They call me and they talk to their MLAs in their areas, and we get that information, and we respond always, and I think we're noted for responding as quickly as possible on each issue.
Mr. Speaker, a supplementary question to the minister. Could I take from the minister's answer that the minister and the premier are available this week to the farm organizations of this province to make an up-to-date presentation on how they see the crisis, and as well present some recommendations which they have to give to government?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I can't answer a question like that that's hypothetical. I talk on a regular basis to the farm leaders by phone and meet them personally. I'll be meeting a group tonight. We do that on a regular basis, as you know, that you to schedule times to meet. We do it as quickly as we possibly can, but if he's got some specific group that maybe supporters of the honourable member that would like to meet with me, I'll be happy to do that.
The honourable member for Lloydminster, followed by the honourable member for Calgary-McCall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to direct my question to the Honourable Premier and ask if he has had an opportunity to get a report on the meeting held yesterday in Ottawa regarding the Husky upgrader proposal.
Yes, I have, Mr. Speaker, and members have probably heard, but I'd be happy to confirm that there was an agreement between the federal government, the government of Alberta, the government of Saskatchewan, and Husky Oil to make sure that the upgrader proceeded right through on a normal basis to handle all of the pre-construction planning and engineering. And that would bring them up to the point where they would decide on actual construction. And we're very pleased that it is proceeding as it should and as quickly as it can. And we're pleased also that the federal government saw their proper role in supporting this as they have with 40% of the costs, and that the provincial governments are 15% each, along with the company who is 30%.
Thanks very much. May I ask a supplementary, Mr. Speaker, and as to whether or not there's some indication as to when construction might actually get started on this project?
I would hope and expect, Mr. Speaker, that this engineering work and planning work will be completed as quickly as possible. As I understand, they are setting a target, hopefully for the end of 1986, but no later than the first quarter of 1987, which is about the schedule that they have had on a consistent basis since this project was announced.
Mr. Speaker, could I?
The honourable member for Lac-La-Biche McMurray, followed by the honourable member for Spirit River Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, the honourable Premier indicated to the Assembly, along with the Husky upgrader, that Syncrude discussions were taking place at the same table. Would the Premier have anything to report on those discussions at this time?
The matter was discussed, Mr. Speaker. It was a different meeting because, of course, the government of Saskatchewan would not be involved, or Husky, but it was between the federal government and the Alberta government representatives. And I feel, Mr. Speaker, that we will be able to provide the House as quickly as possible with information that I would think would lead us to be able to announce that we can proceed with the Syncrude expansion. My desire would be that it would be a shared arrangement that would allow the pre-construction engineering and planning to go ahead in the same way. If it's not a shared arrangement, I've already told the House and the honourable member, and he can report it to the members of his constituency, that the government will then do it, Alberta government would then be willing to do it themselves.
Supplementary question to the Premier, Mr. Speaker. Just to clarify a certain vagueness that I heard in some of the earlier replies, could the Premier indicate whether this government has been able to assure and hold the federal government to its previous agreement to actually provide the loan guarantee of some $780 million towards the actual construction of the upgrader?
Mr. Speaker, the original agreement has been set aside, if you like, while we go through the process I just reported on, and without prejudice to any of the parties as to whether the original agreement would in fact stand throughout the next process of construction, because there will be many new matters of information that would be considered at that time.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker, then to the Premier. If the original agreement has been set aside, as we've heard, I wonder if in the current negotiations there's been discussion about the project being built on this side of the Alberta border so that there would be a maximum benefit for Albertans.
Mr. Speaker, the Government of Saskatchewan is firmly committed to this project, as we are. If any circumstances change in that province, and it appears that anybody there does not want to support it, we would then give consideration to the matter that the honourable member has raised.
Supplementary question then, Mr. Speaker. Supplementary question again to the Premier. With the changes in the situation and the changes in the possible arrangement, I wonder if the Premier could indicate whether that could also entail the Alberta government's commitment being significantly greater than was originally discussed in terms of loan guarantees. Will there be equity investment on the part of the Alberta government?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member is now getting into the realm of speculation, and I just can't speculate with him in that regard.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary question to the Minister or the Premier. Mr. Speaker, to the Premier, we've seen this exercise with All Sands and Esso, where public funds were committed to keep engineering in place. My question is, I may have missed the Premier's answer. How long will this program go on before we get a firm commitment from the federal government? Is there a timetable that the Premier has with the Prime Minister and his counterparts so that we can see that there's going to be some definite decision one way or the other?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I did indicate a little earlier, the engineering and planning would go on as quickly as possible. And the minute that it is completed and it can be assessed and the parties meet to deal with it, then a decision would be taken.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Premier. There seems to be some confusion in the press with respect to the terminology on this $90 million injection of funds. The term study has been used, and I'm just wondering if this is an accurate term, Mr. Premier.
It's judgment, Mr. Speaker, but certainly didn't. In no way is it a study from our point of view. It is, in fact, an investment in this project, in the pre-construction, engineering, and planning that must be carried out in order to have the upgrader proceed, and would be carried out over the same period of time if there was a full agreement right now that it was going ahead totally to completion. So I think the term study is one that slipped out probably from our media friends in Eastern Canada, and you have to excuse that from time to time.
This be the final supplementary. Are we on the same topic? The Honourable Leader of the Opposition, followed by the Honourable Member for Calgary Curry and the Honourable Member for Lethbridge West. We haven't a long list, but I'm becoming concerned about the time because we have had an extraordinary number of supplementaries, some of them very repetitive on previous questions, but I am concerned about reaching even this short list.
Well, supplementary question to the Premier, Mr. Speaker, simply this. The bottom line is we don't have a commitment beyond the $90 million, and the federal government has backed out of an agreement. Did the Premier have the Minister of Energy, in the strongest possible way, tell them that this was unacceptable instead of coming back and congratulating each other on the $90 million situation? Has that been made clear to the federal government that that's unacceptable?
There's a few questions there, Mr. Speaker. I think it was, my answers would be no, yes, and yes.
Supplementary question. Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. There was an agreement. It was trumpeted in this House, the agreement that we had. Now we don't have the agreement. My question is, did the Premier tell the federal government in the strongest possible way yesterday, or have the Minister of Energy, that their attitude and behavior in this matter has been unacceptable?
You have to identify that as being a twin of the question asked before it. The Honourable The honourable member for Calgary-Curried, followed by the honourable member for Lethbridge West.
Mr. Speaker, my supplementary question to the Honourable Premier is, was the general viability of the industry discussed with the federal government, and if so, do we have any commitment that they will be taking some initiative to alleviate the problems faced by the industry in the near future?
Mr. Speaker, the general viability of the energy industry was discussed in a great deal of detail, and there are further discussions going on. It's difficult to know when we might be able to get a decision from the joint discussions, and therefore can only say to the honourable member that we'll be pursuing them actively with the federal government.
Mr. Speaker, if I might be permitted one short additional supplementary, could the Honourable Premier relate what the mood of the federal government is with respect to the problems of the oil industry? Do they in fact recognize the difficulties we're facing, and are they actively participating with us in that regard?
Mr. Speaker, there's been a tremendous contribution to the meetings through the very strong representations of the Alberta members of Parliament. And they worked very hard in coming to a conclusion with regard to the Husky upgrader, and they are working very hard in presenting the case for the energy industry in this province, along with Alberta ministers and officials. And I think it is safe to say on a general basis that the mood is a good one for coming up with a better understanding in the federal government of the concerns and needs, and therefore a better chance of coming up with the right solution.
The honourable member for Lethbridge West has changed his mind. The honourable member for Calgary-McCall, followed by the honourable member for Clover Bar.
Mr. Speaker, I have a short question I'd like to address to the Honourable Premier. It's related to Bill 2 as introduced, and I would like to know what the intention of the government is with respect to the timing of the debate on and the passing of Bill 2, the Alberta Stock Savings Plan Act.
Mr. Speaker, the Alberta Stock Savings Plan Act is a priority commitment of this government, and therefore we are determined it would proceed with the utmost speed through the House.
The honourable member for Clover Bar, followed by the honourable member for Spirit River Fairview.
Mr. Speaker, my question is that the Honourable Minister of Advanced Education, that fount of knowledge, I'd like to ask the Minister of Advanced Education if the Minister of Education, Advanced Education, can indicate how many people applied for the position that Margaret Leahy was appointed to. How many people applied for that position?
Mr. Speaker, I guess that's in my responsibility as a status of women minister, and I can assure the member from Clover Bar that we examined a variety of people for the position. It was not advertised because it's a matter of contract, and because we wanted to keep it separate from the civil service, so to speak. It was negotiated by a contract, and we considered several people for the position.
Mr. Speaker, can the Honourable Minister indicate how many were several, how many people were interviewed for the position?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'd have to check to see all my notes and letters written to me. At the present time, I have, even before the announcement of the Status of Women Council, I have something of the order of 150 letters, plus or minus, people who are interested in becoming members of that council. So from that list, Mr. Speaker, obviously there are a variety of competent and able people who are interested in these issues, and we had a variety of choices to make.
Mr. Speaker, can the Minister just very briefly indicate to the Assembly what criteria it was that the Minister and his steering committee were looking for when they were picking this person? Can the Minister just give us some criteria?
Speaker, there were several criteria which members looked at, and I am sure that the member from Clover Bar will agree that the current choice would satisfy most of the criteria. First of all, I think the ability to communicate and to articulate with a variety of groups across the province must be one of the very important criteria, because of course this position will require an opportunity to communicate, to discuss issues, to listen carefully, and to articulate or to summarize in a very precise way very complex issues for recommendation to government. Secondly, it's important, I guess, that the person should be a woman, although that wasn't the a 100% requirement. I thought that a chairman should be a woman, and I think we satisfied that criteria. Thirdly, I thought, by the way, that the person should be politically neutral, and as far as I know, the incumbent satisfies that test. Fourthly, Mr. Speaker, I thought that the person should have a clear interest and has evidence of an interest in the issues, and perhaps that was the largest of the first question which we weighed. Obviously, in compiling a matrix of variables which would be used to complete an assessment of this type, different weights were assigned by different people who were involved in this decision, but those are some of the questions and some of the variables which were put together to mesh to come up with what I think was a very excellent choice for the chairman of this first council for Alberta.
Mr. Speaker, to the minister, when you start believing some of that stuff that you're peddling, you're really in trouble with the minister.
Mr. Speaker, you've already said that we are always being pushed for time in the question period. If the member didn't really ask the question, didn't mean to ask the question, others would like to have a chance to express a view, I'm sure.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary question to the minister. The minister indicated that one of the criteria is that the person had absolutely, really was apolitical. Can the minister indicate the way the committee was set up to determine if this person was political or non-political? Can the minister indicate what the mechanism was in place and how many people are on this committee to make the final decision to pick this non-political person?
Mr. Speaker, I think Hansford will show that I did not say non-political. To my mind and to others who were involved, I think the term politically neutral is important. Obviously, somebody in this position must have some political conscience, be interested in political issues, and be interested in public debate. That was one of the criteria. Not at all apolitical. I don't know anyone in this province who's apolitical. Certainly, I don't know of too many people who are apolitical. Finally, Mr. Speaker, it has been said that the others have written that the choice was one who was a small c conservative. Frankly, I think the vast majority of the people in this province are small c and perhaps even capital C conservative.
The honourable member for Spirit River Fairview and then the honourable minister of Agriculture wishes to supplement some information previously asked.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to address a question to the Minister of Education concerning the Expo 86 Transportation Grant Program. In light of the fact that grade 6 is in many ways considered to be a traditional year for field trips, and that representations have been made by parents and teachers and by at least this MLA to the minister on behalf of grade 6 students, my question is if the minister has any plan to change the policy that now makes that grant available only to students in grades 7 through 12.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to answer my first question as Minister of Education. I was kind of hoping it would be the official leader of the opposition, the old Delia boy, who had been in a position where he asked me all kinds of questions for the last several years. That apolitical guy from Delia. In any case, Mr. Speaker, the response to the Expo Visit program has been very, very good. We've had, so far, the latest count that I heard, some 32,000 young Albertans from grade 7 to grade 12 who will be going to Expo as part of that particular program. And certainly with any program, Mr. Speaker, there has to be some cutoff lines, whether it be the Widow's Pension Program, this particular program, and the cutoff line was decided at between the grade 6 and grade 7 level because the junior high and senior high students were considered to be those who would benefit the most from the program. This particular cutoff line was considered very carefully, and recognizing, of course, that there would be those parents and children in the lower grades who
would want to go as well. But they certainly can go in any case. However, this particular program only applies to groups who are in the grade 7 to grade 12 range, and the response has been tremendous.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, and certainly I'm as pleased as anybody about the 32,000 that will receive assistance in the currently eligible grades. That has nothing to do, however, with the question that was being asked. My supplementary question to the Minister, though, is what consultation and with whom was undertaken to determine that the program should apply to grades 7 through 12 rather than including grade 6? What consultation with people who might be familiar with educational field trips in the province?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I can't think of any more informed group than our caucus. And certainly we have many teachers in our caucus, and in consultation with their constituents, provided input to us in the decision-making process. I would have to take as notice any detailed response that the member may wish, as I was not the minister at the time that the decision was made. However, I'm sure that there was plenty of consultation that took place.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker, then to the Minister. The answer causes some concern that perhaps the program was developed in a reasonably informal way, and my question to the Minister is, in view of the fact that people are at various distances from major airports and the ability to travel, what study was undertaken, and does the Department have any plans in place to provide supplemental assistance to school groups that have a considerably greater distance to travel and other expense compared to students flying out of Edmonton or Calgary to Expo?
Well, Mr. Speaker, one of the criteria that was used in developing the program was one, it had to be simple. And when we start complicating a program by taking into account distances that are involved, we would end up with a very complex program. It would be difficult to administer, and for primarily the reason of simplicity, $100 for each child that's involved in a group going to Expo with very little administration, and they would be involved in projects to raise further money. I think it's worked out very well.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister. I trust he was not indicating that the program had to be simple so that he could understand it. My question to the Minister is whether or not how does the Minister justify not making the program available to families who are traveling to Expo, coming perhaps from very small schools that are unable to make trips, or from distances where the expense is too great, that the assistance is not available to children traveling to Expo with families as well?
Well, Mr. Speaker, in terms of all the details of that particular program, and we won't get into simple-mindedness of any individuals in this legislature, because it could be embarrassing for certain ones. I would be happy to sit down with the gentleman, and we'll go over every A, B, and C of the program to see if he can understand it.
Question, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister.
This be the final supplementary by the honourable member, followed by a final supplementary of all in regard to the question by the honourable member for Drayton Valley. We're running out of time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My supplementary question to the Minister, Mr. Speaker, then is simply why no criteria for duration of stay or study requirements were attached to the grants to ensure that there would be an educational benefit to the assistance that was provided?
Well, Mr. Speaker, surely the honourable member can understand that any program that involves so many children and so many schools in the province has to be simple. And to get into distances and length of stay of different groups in the schools would be, in my mind, an administrative nightmare. And so the primary reason for the program being the way it is, as I said, it's very clean-cut, easily administrated, and serves an excellent purpose.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to make editorial comment, but I won't. Would students in grade 7 this fall be eligible to go to Expo and receive the grant?
No. Mr. Speaker, it is a good point in that any student who is in grade 6 and the school or the grade 6 class that would wish to go to Expo could do so after July the 1st of this year. They would then be considered to be in grade 7.
In looking at the members who wanted to ask supplementaries, I regret I overlooked the honourable member for Barhead, and if the Assembly agrees, perhaps we could have a short supplementary question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and to my colleagues, but I'm afraid I've been preempted by my honourable colleague from Drayton Valley. She raised the question. It had to do with clarification of children who will be going into grade 7 as of July 1, 1986.
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Mr. Speaker, on Tuesday last, a member for Little Bow asked the question relative to the Agricultural Development Corporation guarantee, and the question he asked was, is there a clause in the guarantee program which can cancel the guarantee if for some reason the farmer is unable to make his or her payments? Mr. Speaker, he asked if I would review that, and I have. And I have to say there is nothing in the attached agreement with the banks that would allow lenders to remove the guarantee from a loan they have approved under the modified program if the farmer is unable to pay. If the farmer is in default, the bank must take collection action on the Section 178 security. If there is a deficiency, the bank calls on ADC to honor the guarantee and turns the remaining security over to the corporation.
Orders of the day. May we revert briefly to introduction of special guests?
Mr. Speaker.
Member for Edmonton Kingsway, followed by the honourable member for Three Hills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Seated in the public gallery are 29 grade 5 and 6 energetic, bright students from Dovercourt School, situated in the heart of Edmonton Kingsway. They are accompanied by their teachers, Mrs. Berglund and Ms. Harrison. I would ask them to please rise and receive the traditional warm welcome from all members.
Mr. Speaker, it is my very pleasant duty to introduce to you, and through you to members of the Assembly, 8 ladies from the Little Red Deer Women's Institute in the constituency of Innisfail. They are Estella Graham, Barbara Thompson, Lavelle Edgar, Barbara Scarlett, Jean Wright,